It was a typical Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day where the sun hangs high in the sky and the heat seems to bounce right off the pavement. The city was buzzing with its usual energy, but in the middle of all that noise, Keanu Reeves was moving at his own pace. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards, and he wasn't stepping out of a limousine. Instead, he was just walking down the street, keeping his head down, blending in with the crowd as best as he could. If you saw him that day, you might not have recognized him instantly. He was wearing his usual simple clothes, a pair of worn-out jeans, a basic t-shirt, and his favorite leather jacket that had clearly seen better days. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, shielding his face from the California sun. To the casual observer, he just looked like another guy in the city, maybe someone on their way to a mechanic shop or just grabbing a bite to eat. But underneath that humble exterior was one of the most famous and successful actors in the world. Keanu had a specific mission for the day. He wasn't heading to a movie set, and he wasn't going to a press junket. He was on his way to a bank. It wasn't a small branch, but it wasn't the massive headquarters either. It was a solid, somewhat fancy building in the financial district, the kind of place where people in suits go to handle serious business. Keanu had been a customer there for a long time, mostly because he liked that they were usually professional and kept things private. As he pushed the heavy glass door of the bank open, a blast of cold air conditioning hit his face. Inside, the atmosphere was completely different from the street outside. It was quiet, smelling of polished wood and expensive coffee. The floors were so shiny you could see your reflection in them. Keanu walked in, his boots making a soft thud against the marble floor. He didn't look around nervously, he walked with a calm confidence, but he also didn't command the room. He just wanted to get in, do what he needed to do, and get out. The reason he was there was actually very heartwarming. Keanu had recently promised a large sum of money to a children's hospital. It was a cause he cared about deeply, but he didn't want to make a big show of it. He didn't want cameras or press releases. He just wanted to hand over the money so it could help the kids. For him, the money was just a tool to do good, and he wanted to keep the transaction as simple and human as possible. That is why he needed to withdraw a large amount of cash. It was old school, sure, but it felt more real to him than just moving numbers around on a screen. He looked around the room. There were a few people waiting in line, mostly dressed in expensive business attire, talking loudly on their phones or checking their expensive watches. Keanu stood at the back of the line, patient as ever. He didn't fidget or check his watch, he just stood there, breathing slowly, taking in the quiet hum of the bank. He looked at his reflection in a glass partition and fixed his cap, ensuring he was decent. He knew that if people realized who he was, the calmness of the room would vanish. People would start whispering, pulling out their phones to take selfies, and that was the last thing he wanted. He valued his privacy and the privacy of others. Slowly, the line moved forward. One by one, customers went up to the tellers, did their business, and left. When it was finally Keanu's turn, he walked up to the counter. The teller was a young man who looked very professional in his suit, with a name tag that was perfectly straight. He was busy typing away on his keyboard and didn't look up immediately. Keanu waited a moment, standing on the thick rug in front of the desk. He cleared his throat softly to get the teller's attention. The teller looked up, his eyes scanning Keanu from top to bottom. He saw the old jacket, the scruffy beard, and the casual cap. He didn't see a movie star, he saw someone who probably didn't have an account at this high-end bank. There was a flicker of judgment in the teller's eyes, quick but noticeable. It was a look Keanu had seen before, the kind of look that says you don't belong here, but Keanu just smiled a polite, gentle smile. "Hi, how are you doing today?" Keanu asked, his voice soft and friendly. He had a way of making people feel comfortable, even when they were being a bit standoffish. The teller forced a professional smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm fine, sir. How can I help you?" Keanu nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his ID and a deposit slip he had already filled out. "I need to make a withdrawal, please," he said, sliding the items under the glass partition. The teller picked up the slip and glanced at it casually. But as his eyes landed on the number Keanu had written in the amount box, his hand froze. It was a massive number. It was the kind of number that makes a bank teller sit up straighter. The teller looked from the slip to Keanu, and then back at the slip, his skepticism growing. In his mind, the numbers didn't match the man standing in front of him. Keanu waited quietly, his hands resting on the counter. He wasn't trying to be intimidating. He was just waiting. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. The teller didn't answer right away. He started typing on his computer, bringing up the account number Keanu had provided. When the screen loaded, his eyes widened. He saw the balance in the account. It was huge. It was far more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. The teller's heart beat a little faster. He started to panic. This didn't make sense to him. How could this guy, dressed like a construction worker on a break, have access to this kind of fortune? The teller looked at Keanu's ID. The name on the screen matched the ID, but the teller's brain was struggling to connect the dots. He looked around nervously, trying to catch the eye of his supervisor. He felt like he had to be careful. He thought maybe this was a mistake, or maybe it was some kind of elaborate scam. He couldn't just hand over that much cash to someone who looked like they didn't have 2 dimes to rub together, even if the computer said the money was there. Keanu stood there, watching the teller's face change from polite to suspicious. He could sense the tension rising. He sighed internally, knowing exactly what was happening. He had faced this kind of thing before, people judging him based on how he looked rather than who he was. He remained calm, keeping his hands visible and his body language relaxed, not wanting to cause a scene. "Sir," the teller said, his voice tightening up a bit. "I'm going to need a moment. I have to verify this request." Keanu nodded slowly. "Sure, take your time," he said, his tone still very kind. "I just need to get this done today if possible." The room felt quieter all of a sudden. The people in line behind Keanu were starting to get impatient, shifting their weight and sighing. Keanu could feel their eyes on the back of his head. The teller signaled for someone, and the story was about to take a turn, setting the stage for a very big mistake that the bank staff would not forget anytime soon. The young teller didn't know what to do. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. He looked at the withdrawal slip, then at the computer screen showing the massive balance, and finally back at the man standing in front of him wearing the old leather jacket. The numbers didn't make sense to him. In his mind, the account balance didn't match the person standing there. It felt like a glitch in the Matrix, or worse, a serious crime happening right in front of him. Instead of processing the request, the teller pressed a small button on his desk. It made a soft buzzing sound that only the staff could hear, but it signaled for help. A few moments later, the heavy glass door at the back of the banking hall opened. A man walked out with a strut. This was the branch manager. He wore a suit that looked more expensive than most people's cars, and he had a way of walking that made it clear he thought he owned the building. His hair was perfectly gelled, and he carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. The manager walked up to the counter, looking annoyed that his important work in the back office had been interrupted. He didn't smile. He stood next to the teller, towering over him, and looked down at Keanu Reeves with a critical eye. He took in the scuffed boots, the faded jeans, and the baseball cap pulled low. He didn't see a movie star. He saw someone who looked like they had been sleeping on the street. "What is the problem here?" the manager asked. His voice was loud and echoed slightly in the quiet bank. He didn't try to keep his voice down, almost as if he wanted everyone to know he was handling a situation. The teller leaned in, whispering urgently, "Sir, this gentleman wants to withdraw this huge amount of cash. The system says the money is there, but, well, look at him. And the ID says it's Keanu Reeves? It has to be fake." The manager picked up the withdrawal slip and let out a sharp, sarcastic laugh. He looked at Keanu with a sneer, shaking his head. "Okay, very funny. Who put you up to this? Is this a prank? Are you one of those YouTube pranksters?" Keanu stood still, his hands resting politely on the counter. He didn't laugh. He looked the manager in the eye and spoke in his usual calm, soft voice. "It's not a prank. I need to make this withdrawal. It's for a charitable cause. The money is there. I just need you to authorize it." The manager's face turned red. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone he considered to be beneath him. He straightened his tie and puffed out his chest, trying to look as intimidating as possible. "Listen to me, son," the manager said, using a tone that was incredibly condescending. "I have worked in this bank for 20 years. I have met thousands of wealthy people. I know what a millionaire looks like. I know what a billionaire looks like. And you?" He pointed a finger at Keanu's chest. "You are not one of them. You look like you haven't showered in a week." The people in the line behind Keanu started to pay attention. A few of them whispered to each other, looking at Keanu with suspicion or amusement. They didn't recognize him either. They just saw a scruffy guy holding up the line. Keanu took a deep breath. He didn't want to get into an argument. He just wanted the money so he could go help the hospital. "Sir, please," Keanu said, trying to stay patient. "I know I don't look like a banker. But the money is mine. I earned it. If you check the signature card, or call the main office, you will see that I am who I say I am." The manager wasn't listening. He was too focused on his own judgment. He was convinced he was right, and he wasn't about to let facts get in the way of his ego. He grabbed Keanu's ID from the counter and held it up like it was a piece of garbage. "This is a fake ID," the manager declared loudly. "I've seen better fakes on the street corner. You think you can just walk in here, flash a piece of plastic, and walk out with a fortune? I should call the police right now and have you arrested for attempted fraud." Keanu felt a wave of frustration, but he kept it inside. He looked at the manager with a mixture of pity and disappointment. It was sad that someone could be so blinded by appearances. "Calling the police isn't necessary," Keanu said quietly. "I am just asking you to do your job. My money is in your bank. I have a right to withdraw it. I decide what happens in this bank," the manager shot back. "And I am not authorizing this. In fact, I am closing your account effective immediately. We don't need people like you messing with our systems. I want you to leave. Now." The manager turned his head and signaled to the two security guards who were standing by the front door. They were big men with muscles bulging out of their uniforms. They started walking toward the counter, their heavy boots thudding on the floor. The scene was getting tense very quickly. "Excuse me, sir," one of the guards said as he reached Keanu. "You need to come with us." Keanu didn't move. He looked at the manager one last time. "You are making a very big mistake," Keanu said. His voice was serious, but there was no anger in it, just a statement of truth. "The only mistake here was you thinking you could fool me," the manager said, a smug smile spreading across his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had caught a bad guy and protected the bank. He felt powerful. "Get him out of here," he told the guards. The guards gently took Keanu by the arms and began to steer him toward the exit. The other customers in the bank were now fully watching the show. Some of them were filming with their phones, while others just shook their heads, glad they weren't the one in trouble. The teller behind the counter looked relieved that he wasn't the one dealing with it anymore. As Keanu was walked to the door, he didn't struggle. He didn't shout or make a scene. He just kept his head high. He knew that the truth would come out eventually. You can't hide the truth forever, no matter how arrogant you are. He knew that this manager, in his rush to judge a book by its cover, had just signed his own termination papers. Once they were outside, the guards let go of Keanu. One of them looked a bit embarrassed. "Sorry, sir," he mumbled. "Just doing what we're told." "It's okay," Keanu said, dusting off his jacket. "You guys were just doing your job." Keanu stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the sun hitting his face. He looked back at the bank building. Inside, the manager was probably bragging to his staff about how he had stopped a thief. He was probably feeling like the king of the world. But Keanu knew that the feeling wouldn't last. The wheels were already in motion. The manager had messed with the wrong quiet guy, and he was about to find out that the quiet ones are often the most powerful. Keanu took his phone out of his pocket. He didn't call the police. He didn't call a lawyer. He made a different call. He dialed the main regional headquarters of the bank. He knew the CEO personally. They had met at charity events years ago. Keanu didn't like to use his connections for himself, but this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about principle. It was about how people treat each other. When the call was answered, Keanu spoke. "Hey, it's Keanu," he said. "I'm standing outside your downtown branch. I just tried to withdraw some money for the children's hospital, and your manager just kicked me out." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yes, he accused me of fraud. He said my ID was fake, and he told me people like me don't have that kind of money." Keanu listened for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Thanks." He hung up the phone and leaned against the brick wall of the bank. He looked at his watch. The game wasn't over yet. The manager thought he had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. And deep inside the bank, the manager sat at his desk, completely unaware that his world was about to come crashing down around him. He had no idea who he had just messed with. It was, without a doubt, the biggest mistake of his career. Inside the bank, the manager was still buzzing with adrenaline. He walked back to his office, feeling like a hero who had just saved the city from a disaster. He sat down in his expensive leather chair and swiveled it around to look out the window, feeling very important. He picked up his phone to text his wife, planning to tell her the funny story about how he caught a guy trying to pretend to be a movie star. "Can you believe the nerve of some people?" he said out loud to himself, chuckling. He was convinced that the man in the worn-out jacket was just a con artist looking for an easy payout. The manager patted himself on the back for being so smart and observant. In his mind, he had protected the bank's money. He didn't feel guilty at all. In fact, he felt a surge of pride. Meanwhile, outside on the busy sidewalk, Keanu Reeves was just leaning against the brick wall, enjoying the fresh air. He wasn't angry. He was mostly just disappointed. He believed that everyone deserved to be treated with respect, no matter what they looked like or how much money they had. It was a simple lesson, but apparently, it was one that the bank manager hadn't learned yet. Keanu watched the cars drive by and the people rushing to their jobs. A few minutes later, a young guy on a skateboard rolled past. He did a double take, slowed down, and looked directly at Keanu. The kid's eyes went wide. He skidded to a stop a few feet away. "Wait, are you Keanu Reeves?" the kid asked, his voice full of excitement. Keanu smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He pushed his cap up a little bit. "Yeah, that's me." The kid couldn't believe it. "No way. Dude, I love your movies. John Wick is my favorite. Can I get a quick selfie?" "Sure," Keanu said. He stood up straight and put his arm around the kid's shoulders. They snapped the photo, and the kid looked at it, grinning from ear to ear. "Thanks, man. You're the best," the kid said, skating away with a new spring in his step. Keanu put his hands back in his pockets and leaned against the wall again. That small interaction made him feel better. It reminded him why he did what he did. He made people happy. He connected with real people. Inside that bank, however, the connection had failed completely. Back inside the bank, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered. The phone on the manager's desk started ringing. It was a special ringtone, one that only rang when the main headquarters was calling. The manager frowned. He wasn't expecting a call from the top brass. He picked up the receiver, putting on his most professional voice. "This is the branch manager," he said smoothly. "Is this the manager who just ejected a customer from the premises?" a voice asked. The voice was cold, hard, and sounded very angry. It was the regional director of the entire bank. The manager blinked, confused. "Yes, sir. I did. We had a suspicious individual attempting a massive fraud. He had a fake ID and everything. I handled it personally to ensure the safety of the bank." "Did you ask for his name?" the director asked. "Yes, he claimed his name was Keanu Reeves," the manager said, laughing a little to show how ridiculous it was. It was obviously a fake. The guy looked like a homeless person. He was wearing dirty clothes and a baseball cap. There was a long, deadly silence on the other end of the line. It was so quiet that the manager checked to see if the call had dropped. "Sir," the manager asked, his smile starting to fade. "Are you telling me," the director said, his voice rising now, "that you just threw Keanu Reeves out of my bank? The same Keanu Reeves who has been a loyal client for 15 years, the same Keanu Reeves who is worth millions and keeps a massive portfolio with us." The manager's stomach dropped. He felt like he had just swallowed a stone. "Wait, what? But he looked so..." "I don't care what he looked like," the director shouted. "I am looking at the security feed right now from the main office. That is him. I just got off the phone with him personally. He is standing outside your building right now." The manager jumped up from his chair and ran to the window. He looked down at the sidewalk. There, leaning against the wall, was the man he had kicked out. And standing next to him, putting away a cell phone, was the kid on the skateboard. The manager watched as Keanu smiled and waved at the kid. "Oh no," the manager whispered. His knees felt weak. He turned back to his desk, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "Sir, I didn't know. I swear, I thought he was a scammer. You should have seen him, he didn't look like." "Stop talking," the director cut him off. "You have just made the biggest mistake of your career. You insulted one of the most respected men in Hollywood, and you refused him access to his own money. Do you have any idea how much trouble we are in?" "I'll go get him." The manager panicked. "I'll bring him back in and apologize. I'll get him the cash." "It is too late for that," the director said. "I am in a car right now. I am 2 minutes away. You had better pray he is still there when I arrive. And you better stay in your office until I get there." The line went dead. The manager stood there, holding a dead phone, sweating profusely. The pride he felt 10 minutes ago had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, gripping fear. He looked at his reflection in the glass of his office window. He didn't look like a hero anymore. He looked like a fool. He realized that he had let his arrogance blind him. He had judged a book by its cover, and now he was going to pay the price for it. Outside, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows suddenly pulled up to the curb, blocking traffic. The car didn't park legally, it just stopped right in front of the bank doors. Keanu, who was still watching the street, stood up straight as he saw the car. He knew who it was. The driver's door opened, and a man in a very expensive suit stepped out. This man was different from the branch manager. He looked powerful, but he also looked respectful. It was the regional director, the boss of the entire area. He didn't walk into the bank. He walked straight to Keanu. The director's face was serious, but when he reached Keanu, he extended his hand. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice full of regret. "I am so incredibly sorry. I heard what happened. It is unforgivable." Keanu shook his hand firmly. "It happens," Keanu said calmly. "People see the jacket, not the person. It's okay." "No, it is not okay," the director said firmly. "It is a disgrace. I promise you, we will fix this right now. Would you please come back inside?" Keanu looked at the bank doors. He saw the security guards looking out with terrified expressions. He saw the teller peeking through the glass. He nodded slowly. "Okay. Let's get this done." Together, the director and Keanu walked toward the bank entrance. As they pushed the doors open, the entire bank went silent. You could hear a pin drop. The customers in the lobby stopped talking. The tellers froze. Everyone sensed that something huge was happening. They walked past the security guards who had escorted Keanu out. The guards looked down at their feet, ashamed of themselves. They knew they had messed up by following the manager's orders without thinking. Keanu and the director walked up to the manager's office door. It was closed. The director knocked on the door loudly, 3 times. "Open up," he commanded. Inside, the manager was sitting at his desk, his head in his hands. He looked up as the door opened. When he saw Keanu standing there next to his boss, the blood drained from his face. He stood up, knocking his chair over. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but no words came out. He just stood there, shaking, knowing that his career was effectively over. The director looked at the manager with pure disgust. "You are suspended, effective immediately," he said. "Step aside." The manager moved like a zombie, stepping away from his desk. The director sat down in the manager's chair and looked at Keanu. "Right here, right now," the director said to Keanu. "Whatever you need. Whatever amount you wrote on that slip. We will get it for you, and we will add a personal apology from the bank." Keanu looked at the trembling manager, then back at the director. "I don't need an apology," Keanu said softly. "I just need the money for the hospital. Let's just finish the transaction." The director nodded and picked up the phone to authorize the withdrawal personally. The room was filled with tension, but Keanu remained the calmest person in the building. It was a powerful moment, a lesson in humility for everyone watching, and a reminder that true class isn't about how you dress, but how you treat others. The air inside the glass office felt incredibly heavy, like the weight of the entire building was pressing down on the room. The regional director sat in the manager's expensive leather chair, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that made it look like he was playing a video game. Every few seconds, he would stop to wipe sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He was terrified. He knew that if he didn't fix the situation immediately, the bank could lose a client worth millions of dollars, along with a massive amount of public respect. In the corner of the room, the branch manager stood frozen. He had retreated to a small chair against the wall, looking like a scolded schoolboy. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking so badly that he had to clasp them together to keep them still. He couldn't believe what was happening. Just 20 minutes ago, he was the king of this castle, the man in charge. Now, he was nothing. He watched the director work, wishing he could disappear into the carpet. Keanu Reeves sat in the guest chair opposite the desk. He was completely relaxed. He looked at the computer screens, then out the window at the city, and then at the two men. He wasn't enjoying the manager's humiliation. In fact, he looked a little uncomfortable with it. He shifted in his seat, resting his elbows on his knees, waiting patiently. "I have authorized the transfer from your primary account," the director said, his voice tight with stress. "The cash is being counted in the vault right now. It will be here in 2 minutes. I am so sorry, Mr. Reeves. I take full responsibility for this. This manager, he is finished here." Keanu held up a hand to stop him. "Please, don't worry about it," Keanu said softly. "I don't want him to lose his job over a mistake. Everyone has bad days. He just judged me by my jacket. It happens." The manager looked up, his eyes wide. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The man he had insulted, the man he had thrown out like trash, was actually defending him. It made the manager feel even worse. It made him realize that Keanu wasn't just a rich guy, he was a genuinely good person. The shame burned in the manager's throat. He realized that Keanu had more class in his little finger than the manager had in his whole body. "No, Mr. Reeves," the director said sharply, glaring at the manager in the corner. "This is unacceptable behavior. We pride ourselves on discretion and respect." He failed on both counts. "But we can talk about that later. Let's just get you what you need." A moment later, there was a knock on the office door. It was the head teller, carrying a heavy canvas bag. He walked in with his eyes low, looking scared. He placed the bag gently on the desk in front of Keanu. "Here is the amount you requested, sir," the teller whispered. He didn't dare look at the manager. He didn't want to be associated with the man who had kicked out a celebrity. Keanu leaned forward and unzipped the bag. He looked inside at the stacks of bills. It was a lot of money, more than most people would see in a lifetime. To Keanu, though, it just meant beds for sick kids, medicine, and better equipment. It meant hope. "Thank you," Keanu said to the teller. He reached into the bag and took out a single bundle. He didn't count it. He trusted the bank, even after everything that happened. He zipped the bag back up and stood up. "Is there anything else we can do for you?" the director asked, standing up quickly. "A car, a private escort to the hospital?" Keanu smiled and shook his head. "I have my motorcycle parked just down the street. I'm good." He picked up the heavy bag as if it weighed nothing at all. "I appreciate you coming down," Keanu said to the director. Then, he turned and looked at the manager in the corner. The manager stood up, his legs trembling. "Mr. Reeves," he choked out. I am so sorry. I really am. I was wrong. I feel terrible." Keanu walked over to him. The room went silent. The director held his breath, wondering what Keanu would say. Would he yell? Would he lecture him? Keanu extended his hand. "It's okay," he said, looking the man directly in the eyes. "Just remember this moment next time someone walks in here wearing old clothes. You never know who they are or what they are going through. Everyone deserves respect." The manager shook Keanu's hand. It was a weak handshake, full of regret, but Keanu's grip was firm and steady. "Thank you," the manager whispered, tears actually forming in his eyes. "Thank you for being kind." Keanu gave a small nod and let go. He turned to the director. "Have a good day, gentlemen." With that, Keanu walked out of the office. When the office door opened, the noise of the bank, which had died down earlier, suddenly stopped completely. It was like someone had pressed the mute button. Every customer, every teller, and every security guard turned to look. They saw the man in the leather jacket walking out of the boss's office, carrying the money bag. They saw the director and the humiliated manager following him out like puppies. The young teller from earlier, the one who had first doubted Keanu, turned bright red. He realized he had messed up big time. He looked at his screen, wishing he could vanish. As Keanu walked through the lobby, heads turned. People started whispering, "Is that him? That is Keanu Reeves? Why was he in the manager's office?" Keanu didn't stop to sign autographs this time. He just wanted to leave. He walked toward the glass doors. The security guards, who had escorted him out roughly earlier, now scrambled to open the doors for him. They held them wide open, bowing their heads slightly. "Thank you," Keanu said as he passed them. He stepped out into the bright California sun. The air smelled better outside. The street noise was a relief after the thick tension of the bank. Keanu walked down the sidewalk, whistling a quiet tune. He adjusted the heavy bag on his shoulder and headed toward where he had parked his motorcycle. Inside the bank, the doors had barely closed behind him when the director turned his fury toward the manager. The silence in the lobby was broken by the sound of the director's voice, loud and clear. "Pack your things," the director said. "You are done here. I want you out of this building in 10 minutes. Don't argue. Don't apologize. Just go." The manager didn't say a word. He walked back to his office, his head hung low. The customers in the lobby started to clap. It wasn't a loud cheer, but a slow clap of appreciation. They liked seeing that justice had been served. They liked that the humble guy had won. Keanu, however, didn't look back. He didn't care about the applause. He didn't care about the manager getting fired. He was focused on the destination. He reached his motorcycle, parked between two cars. He strapped the heavy money bag into the storage compartment on the back of the bike. He zipped it up tight and patted it twice. "That's for the kids," he whispered to himself. He put on his helmet, kicked the stand up, and started the engine. The roar of the bike echoed off the buildings. A young couple walking by stopped and stared. They recognized the actor on the bike. Keanu looked at them and gave a peace sign through his handlebars. He revved the engine once and then sped off into the traffic. He wasn't riding fast, just steady. He was on a mission. The bad experience at the bank was already fading from his mind, replaced by the thought of the good that money would do. It was a perfect example of who Keanu was, someone who could face arrogance and judgment without becoming angry himself, someone who would brush off insults to focus on helping others. The bank had made a big mistake, but the only thing on Keanu's mind was the charity. The roar of Keanu Reeves' motorcycle cut through the noise of the busy Los Angeles traffic. As he rode, the wind rushed past him, blowing against his jacket and cooling him down. The ride to the children's hospital wasn't long, but it gave him time to clear his mind. The heavy bag of money secured safely behind him wasn't weighing him down, instead, it felt like a heavy dose of hope. While the bank had been cold, filled with marble floors and cold stairs, the hospital was the complete opposite. It was a place of warmth, of struggle, and of healing. When Keanu pulled up to the hospital entrance, he parked his bike in a regular spot, not the VIP section. He took off his helmet and ran a hand through his hair. He didn't check his reflection in the mirror. He didn't care if he looked messy. He grabbed the heavy canvas bag and walked toward the main entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the familiar smell of antiseptic and coffee greeted him. It was a busy afternoon. Nurses were rushing around with clipboards, parents were holding tired children in their arms, and the air was filled with the sounds of beeping machines and quiet chatter. Keanu walked past the reception desk. He had been here before, many times. The receptionist looked up, her eyes popping wide open when she saw who it was. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to ask for an autograph or to call security, but Keanu just put a finger to his lips and gave her a gentle wink. She understood immediately. She smiled and nodded, keeping his presence a secret. He wasn't here for a photo op. He was here on a mission. He took the elevator up to the oncology ward. This was the hardest place to be in the entire building, but it was also where he felt he was needed the most. When the elevator doors opened, the atmosphere was softer. He walked down the hallway until he reached the administration office. He knocked on the doorframe. A woman looked up. She was the hospital director, a woman who worked tirelessly to raise funds for the sick children. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a bun, stacks of papers covering her desk. When she saw Keanu standing there with the heavy bag, she stood up so fast she knocked her chair over. "Mr. Reeves," she asked, stunned. I wasn't expecting you. We have a meeting scheduled for next month for the donation." Keanu walked in and placed the heavy bag on her desk. It landed with a solid thud. "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "But I was in the neighborhood, and I didn't want to wait. I know how much you need the new equipment now, not next month." The director looked at the bag, then at Keanu. She slowly unzipped it. When she saw the stacks of cash inside, she gasped. She put a hand over her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. This was enough money to not just buy the equipment, but to renovate the entire playroom and fund the research program for a year. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is a miracle. You have no idea what this means for these families." Keanu smiled softly. He reached out and patted her shoulder gently. "You don't need to say anything. Just make sure the kids get what they need. That's all that matters." He didn't ask for a receipt right then. He didn't ask to put his name on a plaque on the wall. He just wanted to know that the money was where it belonged. He spent the next hour walking around the ward. He sat with kids who were too sick to go outside. He played video games with a teenager who had lost his hair to chemotherapy. He listened to a little girl talk about her dog. He didn't bring cameras. He didn't bring an entourage. He just brought his time and his heart. The smiles on those faces were worth more than any amount of money in the world. Meanwhile, back at the bank, the situation was very different. The regional director had made good on his promise. The arrogant branch manager was standing in the middle of his empty office, packing a small cardboard box with his personal items. A photo of his family, a coffee mug that said "World's Best Boss," and a few pens. That was all he had to show for 20 years of work. He walked through the bank lobby, carrying his box. The security guards watched him go, their faces blank. The tellers whispered behind the counters. He could feel the judgment hitting him from all sides. Just an hour ago, he had been the one judging others, and now he was the one being judged. It was a bitter pill to swallow. He walked out of the building for the last time, the glass doors closing behind him with a final, heavy thud. The story of what had happened was already spreading like wildfire. The young skateboarder Keanu had met outside had posted the selfie online with the caption, "Just met Keanu Reeves outside the bank after they kicked him out for looking poor. What is wrong with people?" The post went viral instantly. Millions of people saw it. News outlets picked up the story. They talked about how one of the richest and kindest actors in the world had been humiliated by a man who was supposed to be a professional. The internet was furious, but they were also inspired. They flooded social media with messages of support for Keanu, praising him for how he had handled the situation with such grace. They shared stories of his kindness, his generosity, and his humility. The mistake the manager made became a legendary lesson for everyone: never judge a book by its cover. As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, casting long orange shadows across the city, Keanu walked out of the hospital. He felt lighter than he had when he walked in. The stress of the bank incident was completely gone. He got back on his motorcycle and put his helmet on. He rode through the streets as the city lights started to flicker on. He stopped at a red light next to a luxury car. The driver, a man in an expensive suit, looked over at Keanu on his scruffy bike. The driver sneered, looking down on the actor, just like the bank manager had. He had no idea that the man on the motorcycle next to him could buy his car 10 times over. He had no idea that this man had just changed the lives of hundreds of sick children. Keanu didn't notice the sneer. He was just humming a song to himself. The light turned green, and Keanu sped off, leaving the arrogant driver behind in the rearview mirror. The day had started with conflict and judgment, but it ended with peace and generosity. The bank manager had lost his job because he let his ego rule his actions. He thought money was about power and appearance. Keanu, on the other hand, knew the truth. Money is just a tool. Real wealth isn't in the bank account, and it isn't in the clothes you wear. Real wealth is in the kindness you show to others, and the difference you can make in the world. Keanu Reeves disappeared into the night, just a regular guy on a bike, carrying the knowledge that he had done something good. And for the children in that hospital, the nightmare of their illness was a little bit easier to face tonight, all because one humble actor refused to let a little bit of bad behavior stop him from doing what was right. It was the perfect ending to a crazy day, a reminder that even in a world full of big mistakes, there is always room for a little bit of goodness.